Okay, once again, hello everyone, and officially welcome to our meetup. I'm Ani, and I'm the community manager of Lead Club. So Lead Club is a private tech leaders community which aims to empower Armenian people managers. And this is actually our second meetup happening in Yandex Hall. The first one was 2 months ago. It was regarding change management. And today we're going to focus more on talent. Without further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker. But before that, one more thing. If you're interested in Lead Club's activities, feel free to approach me throughout the event, and I will be very happy to share all of the exciting updates that we have. We also have a lot of our community members here present, so if you want to talk to them, you can also reach out to them. And we also have a few QR codes here and there, so if you want to register for Lead Club, you can also use those. And with that, I would like to invite Talin Saghdasaryan, our first speaker.
Thank you. Thanks. All right, from behind the tree, I showed up. So I'm Talin, as Ani said, and I will be talking about, if this works. Yes, great. Yeah? Awesome. Okay. So there's always a tech issue at tech events, right? It's not even an issue, but whatever. So I will be talking about the value of L&D, whether it matters, how we see it, and how we show it. Before I begin, can I just please ask for a show of hands if you are an L&D professional or an HR professional that is responsible for the L&D function at your company? If yes, please raise your hands. Okay, if you are a manager at your company, please raise your hands. Awesome, all right, and then everybody else. Okay, cool. And then final question, please, on a scale of 1 to 5, how comfortable do you feel with English? Show of hands. If you feel very comfortable with English, 5. If no, 1, or anything in between. Lots of 5s. Cool. So I don't need to think about my vocab. Awesome. So I'm Talin. I am currently the Educational Programs Evaluation and Development Lead at COAF, COAF Smart Center. I initially started my learning journey, well, tech journey, or however you want to call it, by doing a bachelor's degree in computer science, and then I decided that development is not the best choice for me personally, although tech remains a very interesting sphere for me. And so I then did a master's in philosophy of education. And then I decided that I'm supposed to kind of put those two things together by going into L&D. I worked at ServiceTitan for a while as a learning and development specialist, some of my former colleagues around here. And now I also worked at a couple of educational foundations. So throughout my journey, I've worked a lot with adults, essentially, and I think that's sort of what gives me an interesting perspective on learning and development, because the way I think about learning is that it is a very natural state. I think that learning is as natural as rest and play. This is a quote by Malcolm Knowles. I couldn't fit it on the slide, but he's a great adult education person. The way I think about learning is that it's a very natural state, and that's how I approach learning and development in organizations. So instead of thinking of it as something that we have to do because we have a problem and we want to solve it, I think of it as something that all of us want to do either way, and we just need to figure out how to kind of integrate it and fit it into our current work. Now, the topic of today's talk was, does L&D matter? I think most people here will probably agree to a certain extent that it does. There's a lot of different data. I don't know if the slides, do you share the slides later with them? Probably, yes. Okay, if not, we'll send it. But yes, you can look at the sources later. But 76% of employees say that they're more likely to stay with a company that offers continuous training. 57% of increase in retention can be seen in organizations with a strong learning culture. And 66% of workers aged 18 to 24 rank learning as the third most important perk, which is like pretty high on that list. This is from like different studies across the world. So I think most of us usually agree that L&D is something that matters. However, somehow we always find ourselves in a situation where we don't have time for learning. We can't convince people that they need to spend time and effort on learning. We can't convince organizations to spend money on learning. And it's not really clear why. So my perspective to that is that it's not because learning and development does not matter. It's because of the way we approach learning and development usually. What we usually do, or tend to do, is we do short-term courses. We base it on a few people's observations. Somebody comes up and says, Talin, we need English classes because our people can't talk to our American colleagues. Okay, cool, let's do an English course. We do it for 4 months, and then they're like, oh, it's still not working. The learning did not work. Okay, and we don't do any long-term integration. We don't think of how exactly are we going to use what those people are learning in that course later on. So for example, you are all here. This is a learning opportunity for you. And I promise you, if you go and never think about this session again, this session will not change anything for you in your life or in your work. If we don't explicitly try to think about in what way am I going to try to integrate this? Next time I need to make a learning and, for example, maybe I think next time there's a learning and development team need on my team, I'm going to go and open this presentation and look through it. Maybe there's something that sparks like a new thought there, right? That's a specific way that I think about integrating that. We don't usually do that. Why do we have these issues? Because we don't usually identify the problems. We don't really assess the needs. Very often, what I've seen, because I've used the English course example, very often the English language is not the issue. Cultural communication is the issue. Feedback is the issue. Or something else is the issue. If we don't go deep into trying to identify that, we end up kind of doing something else. And then we also forget that our learners are adults. We assume that it's just a knowledge or skills issue. We only think, okay, I'm going to send them, somebody is going to tell them the right way to do it. They are going to know the right way to do it, and they will come and start doing that. And because of that, we have a difficulty measuring and showing the value of L&D, because doing L&D like that often doesn't lead to a specific value in the organization. So today, what I want to talk about, instead of specifically convincing CEOs that learning matters, I want to kind of take a longer road towards there. I want to think about how we assess learning needs in our organizations, how adults learn, and then moving into how we show and measure the value of L&D. I just want to note, when I looked at the registration list in advance, it was a very eclectic group of people, from managers to HRs to a lot of other people. And so my presentation itself is kind of relatively high level. I'll leave time at the end, 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A, and then we can also network later. So please feel free to jot down your questions if there's anything that you want me to go into deeper later on. So with that, part one. How can we assess learning needs in our organizations? So there's a couple of questions that we need to answer to be able to get to the how. First is the why of it. You can identify current and future capabilities and skill gaps versus identifying how a specific training serves current company goals and what issues it solves. So let's think about it this way. When I was working at ServiceTitan, for example, there were two kind of works or jobs that I used to do. And that's also sort of how I look at my job right now as well. Part one is the specific needs that I have today. For example, a manager comes up to me and says, my team has an issue with technical writing. They have to write technical documents. The way they write them aren't good. Other team members can't use the technical documents that they've written. Let's solve that issue. Okay, let's go deep into it. Let's go find out, is it a skills issue? Is it a willingness issue? Do they want to do it but can't do it? If they want to do it but don't know how to do it, is there a specific reason why they don't know how to do it? Do they have the time to experiment? Are they getting feedback on their current documents? Or are we just assuming that they just don't know and I'm not telling them how to do it? And so on and so forth. So it's a specific training with a specific gap that I'm trying to go and figure it out. Right? That's like part one, and it was an ongoing thing. I had a lot of different stakeholders. Levon and Tigran there approached me at different moments in time with specific needs as well. The second part of the job was trying to figure out on a yearly basis or on a 2-year basis, what are the overall general needs that the organization has, right? So let's say communication was something that would come up very often, and it's something that comes up very often, and we don't really define it because we don't really know what communications mean. Well, we can see that people aren't really talking to each other well, right? So part two of that job would be to try and go and figure out, where are we currently on the skills that we know everybody needs. In tech companies, that could also mean, for example, if I know that my tech stack is going to change, if I'm going to start using another language in a year, or if I'm going to start another type of database in a year or two, where is my current workforce at right now regarding that specific skill, and where do I want them to be in 2 years? It's not a need right now. They're working on it fine, but I might need them to be somewhere else in 2 years. So I need to kind of know in advance that this is what I'm going to need, and then I need to kind of plan for it, right? So that part of the learning needs more generally goes into more organizational approaches, which leads me to the second bit of that, which is the what. There's different levels of a gap analysis. I can do an organizational one, I can do a team level one, and managers very often can also do an individual one. It's very hard to do that as an L&D professional, especially if the organization has, let's say, over 100 people. I can't go and figure out what every single individual needs. A manager can come up to me and I can try and work with them to figure it out, but even that is not really that scalable if you go above like maybe 300 or 400 people. But you can do a gap analysis on an organizational level, on a team level, and an individual level. What's important here is two things. If you are an HR or L&D professional, you cannot do this on your own. At no point in that process are you doing this on your own. You are always going towards your stakeholders, which are the managers, which are the different people in the people operations team, which are the non-managers who can give you some insight into how the team works as well. And then if you're a manager, when you talk with your people operations partner, these are the things that you can kind of try and think about. Am I looking at this from a team level, or do I want them to think of this on an organizational level? Is this something I only have within my team? Is this something I can solve within my team by working with them? Or is this something that I need to think about more organizationally? And then how can I partner with my people operations, business partner to work on that? When do we do this is also a big question. If you have a say about it, try to do it as soon as possible. Usually I would say try to identify things in advance. But usually we sort of approach it in a proactive versus reactive way. If I'm doing it proactively, I'm thinking about upskilling, I'm thinking about long-term strategy. I know the product is going to evolve in this area, and therefore I need my team to figure out how that area is going to get integrated, and so therefore I can be more proactive about it. And this is very important that it kind of ties into the strategy building that the organization does. What we often do is we do our strategies, we do our timelines, and then we're like, oh wait, where do we fit learning into that, right? It's very important to, when we're thinking about strategy organizationally or like a roadmap for our product, if there's things that need learning and development needs, to kind of try and fit that into there. Versus reactive, which is when there's a very specific problem. I don't know, my team just started working with a new colleague in the US and they're having feedback issues. They're not able to accept the feedback. My team can't actually give feedback in a way that our American colleagues understand it. That one was a very, it was a very kind of widespread one, so I keep bringing that up. But another one that was an interesting one for me was the DevOps team once said that the developers, kind of when they go up to the DevOps team, have a difficulty explaining what it is they need from the team. So there was a need to kind of have the team have a more in-depth understanding of DevOps so that they could kind of phrase their inquiries better. They didn't need a whole lot of like in-depth DevOps knowledge per se, but they needed enough to be able to phrase the questions better. So that's a more reactive thing. It's a specific problem. There's a communication issue between those two teams, which is based in a knowledge gap. It's not about how people talk. It's about a knowledge gap. And therefore we go and try to solve the knowledge gap. And then who does the needs analysis? Depending on the level of analysis, you either do it, a manager can do it on their team if they know specifically what they're looking for. A manager can do it with an HR or L&D specialist or through another kind of partnership. So, essentially anyone can do it if you really want to do it. But I'd say partner with somebody who's done it before so that it's kind of easier for you too. If we go into more specifics, what tools do we usually need? Or what tools do we usually use for needs analysis? One thing that is very often useful, but I would say HR and L&D professionals are usually scared of using, I know I was scared of using it, was specific data that we already have, specific quantitative data that we already have. So performance review data about like how the team is doing, retention rates, satisfaction rates that the organization kind of already has, or data that shows some kind of work efficiency. So if we're thinking of sales, let's say, you know, a specific metric of how many people are turning into leads and so on and so forth. The reason I say we're usually scared of using this data is because very often this data is not only dependent on L&D. And so if I say, well, I can see that I have low retention rates, and I assume it's because the team doesn't have enough learning opportunities, and I, as an L&D person, go in there and say, I'm going to add more learning opportunities for the team, and then that's going to raise your retention rate. It very often might not, because it's not only dependent on that. It can be dependent on a lot of other things, and vice versa. If I have like data that shows work efficiency and it's very low, and I as an L&D professional go and say, well, I am going to raise that data, again, it might be partly because of knowledge, and then it might also be partly because of processes. And I can't do anything about the processes, but I can do a lot about the L&D part of it. And I might do that, and then the process doesn't change, and the data doesn't change, and then it's like, oops, L&D was useless. Which is why we often kind of like to say that, oh, it's hard to measure. Oh, it's, you know, it could impact it, but I'm not going to promise it impacts it, and so on and so forth. And that's very fair. I get that. I literally so I'm a new manager now, and 2 days ago I was working on goal setting for my team, and I was trying to write the goals, and I was looking at our current rates. And I was trying to challenge myself to go into, okay, we can increase those rates. We can do better than this. And then I was like, but what if I can't? And then they're going to come and tell me, you put those specific metrics and you didn't reach them. And, you know, yeah, I'll talk with my HR over there later about it. But, it's an interesting personal and professional challenge to kind of challenge yourself to set specific metrics and try to go on. The issue there is, as I've already said, the metric specifically doesn't often measure the learning itself. So what you could do there is, instead of just having that one data point that is very specific but not only correlated with L&D, add other data points as well and say, this is my stretch goal, this is where I'm really aiming at, but I provisionally say this is also dependent on ABC, but I can also show you that the learning specifically was efficient by doing this, right? So have different spaces you look at for it. But if we go back to the needs analysis, so I use available data. Second thing I can do a knowledge assessment. This is specifically helpful if I'm looking for specific technical skills improvements. Let's say, depending on your team, if they're not all senior, let's say they're mid-level developers and we're looking to move them into a senior position and there's like a specific skills gap, I can actually do a specific knowledge assessment. And it can also serve as a pre and post measurement. I can show that this person before now was not solving this problem and they're solving this problem now, so it was good. The third is I can do interviews. This is very helpful if you're doing a kind of more team or organizational level needs assessment. I can talk with other people to get to the root, to get to specifically how this issue is impacting the business. Because sometimes maybe it's not really a problem. We don't like it, it's fine, but it's not really impacting the work. We're still figuring it out, right? So then you're not going to be able to show the value because it wasn't really the biggest deal that you had. If it is an actual problem, it definitely has an impact on business. What you need to do is find where it is impacting the business. Interviews allow for depth, but they're a bit time consuming, so don't do them for like small scale stuff. It's going to take a lot of time. Alternatively, what you could do that won't take too much time is surveys, which can help gather wide insights. This is especially useful for my L&D and HR people out there, because you can do surveys with a much bigger scope, which can give you enough of a starting point to sort of figure out where the main issues lie. It's not really that useful for depth, but it's good to start with it and go to management and be like, I'm seeing these issues here. I want to kind of dig deeper into them and see where this leads me. And then finally, I can use focus groups. This one's good if I want a bit of depth and I don't have too much time, but I do want to get people's opinions. I also want to use this as an opportunity to sell it on them, to be like, yeah, see, you guys say this is a problem. You're identifying it, right? Cool. Okay, so here's what we're going to do for it. After the focus group, obviously. But then you have a specific data point that this person has said this is a problem. This is especially useful if you're doing something cross-team with other managers and you need to sell them on the idea as well. Just pay attention to how it's being facilitated. Sometimes people just tend to kind of agree with each other in focus groups, just be like, yeah, I agree, it was right. Or it kind of tends to lead them down a path of just whining about a problem that all of them have, which is kind of a good data point for the first 3 minutes, and then it's not. So just pay attention about how you facilitate it and think about the grouping to make sure that everybody is on relatively the same level so that they don't feel uncomfortable saying things in front of the other colleague that they're not supposed to say things in front of them, or so on and so forth. So that's sort of how we kind of do that. And don't be afraid to use qualitative feedback. I know tech is big on quantity and data and numbers, and I get that. I like them too. But qualitative data there's some things that you really, aside from the fact that, like, you know, I'm saying this for my colleagues out there, but aside from that, there's some things that you really can't measure. It's really hard to say why specifically it's hard to put into numbers why people can't give feedback to each other. But it's very easy to get qualitative data about that from a specific stakeholder whose opinion about the matter can be valued. And you can even use that person as a data point before and after to show value, to say this person is now happy with how we're communicating with them. So that's sort of there. If you move to part 2, so we've done the needs analysis. We've really identified the problem. We know what it is we're trying to solve. Very cool. Now, how exactly are we going to solve it? There are many, many formats out there. Hopefully, you've all seen different kinds of formats. What I want to talk about here is kind of how you choose and pick and choose a format. I will say before I move on to the next slide, I will not be talking about specific formats today. I will be talking about principles that help adults learn based on the theory of andragogy. Okay, there we go. First, so it's basically 6 principles. The first of that, and it's the blue one over there. The circle is a bit weird. It starts on the second circle. But the first one is that adults have a self-concept of being self-directed and responsible for their own learning. It is a movement from dependent learning as children to being self-directed around your learning as an adult. Adults like having a say about how, when, where, what they learn. They don't like it when people come and tell them, this is what you need to do. I don't think this is only about learning, but I think this is true specifically about learning, especially because they don't always see themselves as having to spend time on learning. At some point, people are just like, well, I know how to do my job. I'm just going to do my job. And so they like options when it comes to learning. So how can we create those options? If you're thinking about your team, if you're a manager, you can give them a choice as to which area of improvement they can focus on in the next 6 months, right? We've identified 3 areas of improvement. They don't have time for 3 areas of improvement. Choose which one you want to focus on. As an L&D specialist, when I'm creating a course, I can think about where I can give them choice. Do they have choice around when to go through the learning? If not, do they have choice about where to go through the training? Do they have choice about when to ask questions, which topics they want to focus on, and so on and so forth? I can think of that in very many kind of formats. So essentially, try to give them choice. However, I will say, importantly, while giving them a choice, people sometimes might not be the greatest at choosing how to learn. If I have a choice and I choose that my next area of improvement is going to be in the area of strategy development, because I need to work on that right now, for example, I might not be able to choose the best resources for that. So my manager can still help me choose those resources. The difference is if I go up to my manager and say, please help me with this, I've still made the choice. If my manager says, this is the book you're going to read, I might be like, is it the best though? Do I really have to? So, you know, try to kind of create space for self-direction. The second is about adult learning experience. Adults bring a wealth of life experiences and prior knowledge to the learning process. They use their experiences as a foundation for new learning. This is, I think, also true for children. I don't think this is only true for adults, but for adults it's a bit even more important, because if you want to change actual behavior, the way people approach things, the way people code, the way people talk, the way people communicate, the way people write, you need to convince them that the new way is better than the old way, that they can do this and it will help them better. They need to unlearn whatever it was they were doing and relearn a new way of doing things. If I ignore their previous experiences, if I ignore the reasons they've come to the conclusion that this is the best way to do this, I will not be able to get through to them. So this, while it may not be the best kind of useful principle for a manager, because if you're just showing them this is how you write the code and this is why, it might not be an important principle. This is a very important principle for my HR and L&D people out there. Because if we're doing a course and we're not actually drawing on people's experiences, it's not really that helpful. We're not going to get to change much. Although I will say for managers, if you're coaching a person around a specific thing, getting them to talk about their previous experiences and then moving on to how they can do this moving forward can be very helpful. The third is readiness to learn. Adults are more ready and willing to learn when they perceive a need to acquire new skills or knowledge that have immediate relevance to their lives or goals. So I think this is very obvious. I think everybody will agree with this. I don't think this is something I'm saying that's very new, but adults are ready to learn if they know where this is going to be useful. So essentially, if it's, you know, the organization needs you to learn this because, the team needs you to learn this because, you need to learn this because, right? This is going to be helpful to you outside of your job here, or this is going to be helpful to the team because it's just going to make things more efficient and we're not going to have to go home at 1 a.m. tonight, you know, or whatever. So just try to show the immediate relevance of it, because something that's like 1 year on from here is just not a good motivating factor. And adults are also more motivated when they perceive their learning experiences as task-oriented and goal-driven. So it needs to also be specific. We don't usually think about yourself, right? It's very hard to kind of you know, learn about new things if I don't really know what I'm learning what exactly my goal is. Where do I want to be in 2 months about this thing? It's important to help. And often, if we go back to the self-direction space, this is where people need most help, because you can help them specify a goal and then help them just be self-directed within that specific goal of learning. Adults are internally motivated to learn and tend to be self-directed, but they might not always have the capacity to be self-directed. I've already sort of talked about this. But the important thing here is people like to learn. I know we tend to think that people don't like to learn, but people usually like to learn. It's just a matter of what they want to learn about at this specific moment in time might not be what we need them to want to learn. So I would say, don't forget this. Don't view learning as like something that I'm forcing them to do. Try to find the space where they already want to improve and try to kind of fit that into it. And finally, adults want to understand why they need to learn something before they engage with it. This is about the purpose of learning. This sixth principle was added later. I think it sort of covers the other 5, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. So that being said, how much time do I have? Was this 30 minutes? Okay. I have 10 minutes? Okay, I'm gonna go through this quickly. Sorry. So that being said, if we've done all of this, if we've decided if we've been able to identify the problem and we've been able to find a solution that kind of fits all of these principles, how do we measure and show the value of L&D? before the intervention, before I do the learning intervention, in whatever format it is, be it a course, be it coaching, be it mentoring, be it giving them a new task during which they need to learn something, whatever you choose to do, use data points to define the problem. Clarify the applicability of the learning, discuss in advance where and how you expect the team member to use new knowledge and skills or change behavior. This is also helpful, especially if you're a manager. Bring it up during your one-on-ones. Bring it up during your team meetings. Tell them, I expect you to use this when you're working on this part of the project. That will be very helpful for them to force themselves to also think about it. Otherwise, they won't. Choose an appropriate learning format. Courses and lectures are not always the best learning formats. Coaching, mentoring, peer learning, experience sharing might be really helpful, though they're slightly harder to organize, so do feel free to draw on your HR and people operations partners when you need them, and define specific check-ins. Even if they're not going to start using it because they're going through a 6-month course, have like a check-in every month or 2 months to get them to talk about what they're learning and out loud think about how they're going to kind of apply it to what you're doing. And then after the intervention, you can measure things in 4 levels, essentially. The first one is reaction, whether they like it. And that's probably what we'll be measuring today at the end with the feedback. Do you like it? Did you think it was engaging? Did you like the speaker? Do you think this is going to be something helpful? It's good information just to show that the intervention was kind of good. But this is usually where we stop at the measurement level, and that's why we can't show the value, because just because you liked it doesn't mean it was actually useful. You can use NPS scores. You can have qualitative feedback about the trainer and the content. What it's really important here is to choose questions that imply a clear action if the score is low. Think about, if I see that there's a low score on this, what am I going to do with it? If you can answer the question, fine, leave the question in. If you can't, change it. Level 2 is learning. This is specifically, especially if it's technical, it's very easy to do. You can do a test with open-ended written questions. You can do specific problems to write and get qualitative feedback on. It's relatively easier to do because it's still about what exactly have I learned. So for example, at the end of the session, I could ask you, what are the 4 levels of measurement? If you were able to say it, then we measured the learning. If you're not, then we know that you haven't learned it. Level 3 is behavior. This is usually often qualitative and can be specific, tied to specific goals. You can use stakeholder feedback for this, and you can use manager feedback for this. It's essentially important to see whether their behavior has changed. You cannot do this right after the training because you need to see whether they actually use it during their time. So maybe 3 or 6 months later. And then level 4 is the results. And this goes back to those KPIs that we were scared of because we might not have been able to show value with them. But this is where you kind of this is the most important space where you can kind of show the value of all that. And you might have a results KPI for like an overall L&D function. You might not be able to show a results KPI for a specific kind of training, although in some cases you might. And so that's where I'll leave you with it. I hope this was slightly interesting, but I will, drawing on the principles of andragogy, I will say just take a half minute to think about when is the next time you're going to think about L&D, and what is a specific question or takeaway that you want to remember in a week. Write it down somewhere, open it in a week, delete it if you don't feel like it, but try to kind of move it forward. And if you have any questions, I'm open.
Okay, Talin, thank you first of all.
Thanks.
I have a lot of questions, maybe ask the hardest one.
All right, let's go.
So it's really hard to identify what to learn in age of AI because you don't know where the world is going, right? Mm-hmm. So like 5 years ago, it was very obvious, I'm going to learn this, then this, then this, then this. Now I'm asking myself where I want to learn, what my organization have to learn, where I'm going, and it's unclear. And when it's unclear, I'm struggling to suggest something currently, seriously, because I don't know. So what yours thoughts about it?
Okay, I'll think out loud with you. I think that's a very interesting question, especially in terms of like, what is my profession going to be in 5 years? We really don't know, and I get that. one thing that from my perspective, looks like very useful is to just learn how to use AI, the AI tools that we currently have, better than we do them. That one is very obvious to me. Like, we don't all use them very well. All of us use them very differently. We also don't often give explicit time to thinking about it. Like, there's been very few times, if I think about myself, there's been very few times where I've actually spent time on trying out different ways with ChatGPT specifically and seeing like which one do I get a better response with. But I'm sure if I did that once, it will give me a better efficiency in the long run in terms of like, you know, what I get from it. So, you know, creating space to kind of learn how to use the specific tools that we have. That would be like option one. Option two is use whatever L&D and HR people you have in your organization to go and do research on it and to try and identify what might be a proactive way of preparing for what might come in 3 years. It might not be a specific plan, as in like, they might also not be able to identify the specific skills, but they can identify check-ins that they're going to do over time. They can prepare resources for when the need comes up, and they can do a lot of other things that might come in handy when the time and moment comes of like, oh, wow, okay, now we need to change something in the team. So I'd say those two right now.
Yeah, got it. Also, one more maybe, and I'll give stage to others. So the statistics you show on the first slide,
Yes.
76%. And I was thinking about that for like maybe 3 minutes. And I realized, okay, there are maybe 20 more factors which might affect employees staying or leaving.
Yeah.
And even though they saw that, okay, learning might change their mind, but how likely is it that they might change their mind? Because there are also 20 other factors like salaries, I don't know, colleagues, environment, office space, blah, 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 blah. Mm. We all know all of that. So even though you try to convince me that this is very important, I was thinking about that and I realized that this fact is not convincing me yet.
Okay. I will say, to me, out of the 3 ones that I have added here, the last one is the most convincing. And I think personally for me too, because I recently went through a job change, when I was looking for a new job, one thing that I was very interested in is how much will this job get me out of my comfort zone? How many new things will I need to learn? I'm still confident enough that I can do it well, but I know that there's like a specific gap that I need to kind of work on to do it really well. And to me, that was very motivating. Like, I chose this job partly also because it had a very specific thing that I could learn while doing it. That's just my example of it. Obviously, that's just that's not data here. But to me, that one makes most sense, that you can see. I don't remember how many people they did it with, so I can't give you like how many people that is about, but I can check and send it to you later because, yeah. But, you know, ranking learning new skills at the 3rd most important perk is actually like, it's pretty high on, because like, let's say first 2 are maybe salary and health insurance or health benefits. 3rd, learning is pretty high on the list to me.
And is it really connected to L&D department overall? Because I want to learn, I go to challenging work, I agree all of that.
It's not like, necessarily L&D. I would say, but I would say organizations that have a strong learning culture have both good L&D departments and also managers who can kind of facilitate learning on their teams.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone?
And then we have a question over there.
Yeah, I have a question about the time which people invest into learning. Should it be the work time or outside of work? And similar to this, what do you think about the homework? So when you have one time of learning, and how people usually react on the homework? Because from my experience, most of them just ignore the homework, and there is no needs to do the homework.
In terms of time, whether it should be on company time or not, I think it's a very individual answer. Individual as in like the companies decide that. From my perspective, learning is very effective if it is tied to what you do on your job. So ideally, I would need to learn something new because I need to use it in my next project or in my next task. that sort of puts away the question of, do I do it on company time or not? Because I need to do it anyway, and it's part of my job. I need to learn it. And in those cases, people are usually also more open to spend their own time on the learning because they're also spending a little bit of the job time on the learning, and they're kind of excited to get it going. But I would say it's very dependent on the organizations, and also how much of an improvement need you have. Like, is it more or less, are we like where we want to be, we just want to get better, or are we pretty low relative to where we want to be, and do we really need to invest the time? If we really need to, then it might be more effective to do it on company time, because it's also something that will incentivize people versus asking them to do it on their own time where they might not. In terms of homework, I think it really depends on the course and how much deep we want to go into something. If you can organize a course in a way that you don't really need homework, cool. That would require more class time, so to speak. I think homework is less about like doing new learning at home, more about having those different check-ins of like, I learned this here and I'm not going to think about it for another week, versus I learned this here and then I think about it over here somewhere in the week and then I go back. It sort of kind of counters the forgetting curve that, you know, people usually forget a lot of the percentage of what we just talked. Like in 3 hours, if I ask you what this session was about, you'll definitely have forgotten half of it, regardless of how great I was, which I don't think, you know.
Yes, thanks. And about the balance between work time and non-work time. In work time, most of the people just want to learn to work less. So we, with work time, we get less motivated people that just want to spend time on just listening, not learning. And if there's an additional time, there are less people, but they are more motivated. So it's not easy to decide. Yes. It's not about the company, it's about the experience, I think.
One thing I would say to that is people don't work 8 hours a day. Like, we think they work 8 hours a day. Nobody can use their brain for 8 hours a day. You have hours in that day, even if they're coming to the office at 9 and leaving at 6, which I think nobody in tech does. But even if they're doing that, they are definitely not working from 9 to 1 and then from 2 to 6. They might just stare at the screen from 4 to 5 and just act like they're working, but their brain's just not working. So you have inefficient work time anyway, kind of using that in a way that your direct report is going to feel good about, and it's learning and they're going to be excited about it, but they need slightly less brain power than figuring out the solution to this new problem might actually be helpful, because you're using that time efficiently as well. But I get that it's very different and it depends. And so, yeah, it's also very team specific, I would say as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We had a question over there.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. So my question is, sorry. My question is, how can we develop learning culture, or like in the company as HR professionals? So when people really don't tend to like, they don't like really learning, or the initiative doesn't come from their side, or even from the manager's side, can you advise like techniques or tools so we can use to boost the learning culture in the company? Thank you.
I would say lit club people, that's like a whole other topic that you guys can have. Because it's like, it's a lot of, it's a big topic, I would say. It's not a one thing or two things that I could suggest that would work. Two things that I would just off the top of my head would say is, again, I think of learning as a very natural state to be in. So if nobody in the organization wants to learn, not even the managers are coming up to you with specific needs, try to figure out why. Have they done it previously and they haven't gotten responses and stakeholders haven't helped them? That's why they're not coming up anymore. Is the work not challenging enough to anybody that they don't feel the need for it? is everybody just tired of working? What is the reason why nobody wants to actually learn? If you don't figure that out, you're not, no matter what techniques you do sharing Fridays, or you do, I don't know, kind of going into the manager's team and trying to get them to share things with each other. You can do a lot of different things, but if you can't really identify why nobody wants to learn, you won't, none of that is going to be particularly useful. That would be my first, if I went into a situation there, I haven't had that situation before. For example, at Service Titan, it was the opposite of that. People had a lot of needs and stuff, and I had to do more of a stakeholder management situation, trying to figure out what's urgent, what's not, what's good for the team here, what's good for the team in the US, etc. There was a lot of that going on. So I'd say kind of first try to work on that. And then maybe try to start with things that are relatively, well, there's two ways to approach it. One is try to start with things that are relatively low impact but easy to do, and that people won't feel like it's taking too much of their time, but it might give them a little bit of value and they like it. Or go into the exact opposite direction, which is identify one specific, very important thing that people care about, even if they're not identifying as a learning need, and try to solve that to build trust towards the function, and then move on. But it would very much depend on the specific context. So I find it hard to answer in a more specific way, but I think it could be a whole other topic, talk that people could have. So yeah. Thank you. I think we have a question over here and then over there, but I don't know if we have the time. Okay, cool. Go ahead, okay.
Yeah. First of all, thanks a lot for the topic you brought for us today. I think it will be actual in the next 5-10 years, even in AI world. Yes. I have a quick one. So, based on principle 4, orientation to learning, adults are not children, right? Yes. Based on your experience, or maybe some researches or anything, what do you think if we can use gamification as a tool to motivate people?
So my experience with it, and the research is different. The research says it works really well. There's a lot of research in the gamification world that says that adults like play. I also think play is a natural state. We just move very far away from it when we grow up. We start to think play is something that children do. It's not something that we do. But adults like it. I mean, I don't know. How many of you are gamers? See, there's a couple of people out there. There we go. Oh, that's why you asked the question. Gotcha. So I think, and there's a lot of research that says that gamification works in terms of getting people involved in things and engaged with things. My experience with it is it's very hard to do well. It's extremely hard to do it well and not cringy, where people are like, why are we doing this fake thing of points and whatever and this and that? I think that is a very difficult thing to kind of solve. I haven't tried to do it in a while, so I'll have a hard time giving you specific pointers. What I found is what would be really helpful is to go into actual game design and see what is the thing that makes games good, and try to kind of incorporate that into learning. That being said, I am not sure whether it impacts learning quality as much versus learning engagement. I think it impacts engagement a lot. People get involved, they want to get the points, they want to do this, they want to do that. There's a leaderboard, they can see who's where, or there's a badge they're wanting and it looks pretty on the screen, and so on and so forth. And that gets people engaged. Learning quality-wise, I don't know if it impacts it as much. So I would say the second challenge there would be to have good enough learning there to actually, for it to be useful, versus just something that they do and have fun with. Which isn't, having fun is not bad, but if we're doing it for learning purposes, then we need to have the quality of the learning there as well. So, that's my kind of out loud thinking about it.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you. Just first one thought. It is a scientific data that people like about what they like about their work. They should make impact. They should be fairly treated. And the third is being better at what they do. So this is about the topic. I have basically two questions. How do you value the sharing of the knowledge gathered through learning at work time, for example? Is it good, bad, distraction, or motivation? And second one, how do you value the managers' effort, like to learn themselves so they can be a role model, or vice versa, like they constantly talk about learning, but they themselves don't do anything, so how they should?
So for the first one, I personally think experience sharing is a really, really good tool. If you can do it well, it's really good. Not just because it is a learning activity and people can learn from it, but also because it creates a space for people from different teams with different experiences to share things together, get together in a room and talk about whatever it is they're doing. Especially if you do it in your own organization with people from different teams, I guarantee you they're going to have new ideas about the product or the processes that would not have come up otherwise because you've put them together. And it's because why we do team building stuff as well, right? Partially because we're putting people who don't usually have to talk together, we're putting them in a room, asking them to talk about a specific thing which facilitates their talking, but they are going to go and talk about other things as well, even during the coffee or wine, apparently, and so on. And so I think that is really, really important. I don't think it's a distraction. I don't think it's a waste of time. I think it gets perceived as a waste of time if we don't do it well. And don't do it well means we haven't worked with the speaker, the experience sharer, well enough in advance to make sure that they know what they're going to be talking about and they can do it well. Or if we're doing it about a topic that no one cares about. But other than that, I think it's like top notch. Do it. In terms of the manager, I mean, I think that manager setting an example is really important because, you know, people do as we act, not as we say. And so that's very important. And it's usually very reassuring for people to hear their manager say, I also don't know this. I'm going to go and learn about it, or let's figure it out together. Because that gives them space to be like, I don't know this, instead of come up to you as a manager and be like, no, I do this well. And I don't know how to move the conversation forward because the person thinks I'm trying to like find a bad thing on them, which I'm not. I just want to help them, you know, get better. So I think, yes, setting an example is really important. Okay, thank you. I will allow Narek to come.
Thank you so much. And I will suggest everyone, if you still have questions for Talin, write them down somewhere, save them so you can ask them later on during the networking part of the event. And without further ado, I would like to invite our next speaker, Narek Aslikyan.
Thanks a lot. Hey, everyone. Talin had a very good trick with the voting part with your hands. I liked it a lot. Let's use it one more time. But this time I will ask you to show how tired you are. 5 is tired as hell. 5. Yeah, okay. Great, great. In general, in your life. How exhausted you are, yeah. So, great. Nothing great, actually, but okay. So, I'm Narek, I'm from ACA, and I'm the co-founder of Lead Club also. But the first question that can come up, and you will ask me if we will be fully honest, will be the following. Why is this HR guy talking about people management? It's a Lead Club, Leadership in Tech Club, so we are expecting to see tech people managers, people with valid experience of managing huge tech teams, and who will share relevant examples and so on. Sounds very valid, but actually HR guy is the guy is not the right word. HR person is the go-to person for the tech manager if something is connected to peopling. I mean, if you have some issues with people, or you have questions about people, working with people, resolving conflicts, and so on, you're going to HR person. But the most honest answer is that people management is my personal passion. So I like to do everything related to people management, including making mistakes. So I did a lot of mistakes. I like to make some experiments in people management, playing with emotions. I know it's not the the best thing to do, but this is the only thing that I can do to learn and to compare myself with myself. So I want to take myself as a benchmark for the future development of me as a people manager. So my path was, I will come shortly to the part with my background just to make sure we're on the same page. I have 15 years, if I'm not mistaken, 15 years of experience in human resources, and 14 years out of these 15 years were in people management. So established a consulting company in Russia in 2010, and then moved to Armenia and launched Armenian Code Academy and several spin-offs like Lead Club. And in 2016, we also launched the first tech recruitment company in Armenia called Meetup. And I don't think that the best method of like evaluating how deep is your managerial experience is the number of people you're managing. But just to mention, in Armenia, in all of our companies, we had in total like 65 teammates. When we were trying to find the best managerial approach in these teams, we were imagining like we are 300. I mean, we were trying to implement things that should be implemented when you are a 300 company. But how to measure good management? If not the number of people you are managing. Of course, being an entrepreneur helps me to refer to some numbers, financials, maybe some number of users of your product, and so on. But if we are talking about good management, how can we evaluate it to keep calm and say that we are doing good our job? Staff engagement, yeah, sure. Satisfied employees, okay, any other options? Okay, we can just retention of employees. Okay, great. Reaching KPIs. Amazing. It looks like you have seen my next slide. Okay. So there is a term called staff engagement. It's not so commonly used, but for me personally, it's the only one-stop shop metrics for measuring a good management. The right description of staff engagement is the strength of your connection, strength of the connection of your employees and the organization, both mental connection and emotional connection. Sounds very HR-ish, like very not business-oriented description. I agree, but on the next slide we will see that it turns out that eventually there are a lot of business metrics engagement effects. Staff engagement includes measuring how satisfied our employees are, how happy they are, how they are motivated to achieve goals, how they are communicating about the company, both inside the company and outside the company, and how actually they are reaching their goals. What are their results? And yeah, if you just open chat.com, the new domain of ChatGPT, and type there like, give me some numbers of Gallup studies or other research to show the numbers of influence of staff engagement rate to the business metrics, you will find very interesting numbers. How staff engagement affects not only the retention or satisfaction or NPS, like Net Promoter Score, referrals, and so on, but also like production defects or profitability or any other business metrics as well. So companies with high engagement rates are much more profitable than others. Who is responsible for keeping engagement rates high? What are your options? Manager, you mean middle management? Okay. HR? Project manager? Everyone. I want everyone. Yeah. Okay. There is a great book written by Ben Horowitz. It calls What You Do Is Who You Are. And he's referring that anything connected to culture or anything with organizational effectiveness, organizational culture, should be started from the C-level, from the founder. And if we are talking about crucial metrics like staff engagement, which affects business metrics, number one person who is responsible for staff engagement is a C-level. So founder, chief executive officer, or someone who is in charge for the organization in general. Then it goes to direct manager, like middle management. So these are people who are affecting the staff engagement rate. So they are not the first owners of the engagement rate. They are not the first people who is interested to provide the highest engagement rate in the industry for that company. But these are the people who are making this engagement rate. And the last one, people ops or HR people. Sorry. Not the last one, like not the important one, but these are people who execute the engagement measurements. These are people who advise C-level and direct management what to change, how to improve. So, what are the principles of measuring? Before jumping to the specific methodology of measurements of staff engagement, some crucial principles. So, it makes no sense to provide survey of staff engagement once. You will learn nothing. You will learn just how to, I don't know, compare my Armenian team with some best Bay Area benchmark. And it means nothing. So the best part starts from the second one. So you need to provide, you need to run these surveys regularly. At our company, we are keeping the biannual, not biannual, I mean twice a year. Yeah, we are giving surveys to the team twice a year to measure the effectiveness by all the parameters and try to fix and all the issues we are detecting twice a year. The second one, you need to be no pushy. So you can't just make it obligatory for everyone to fill out the form or share their thoughts, and this should be anonymous, of course. And the last one, fill rate is important. So you need to follow up people and try to keep the fill rate above 80% of your team. I used to announce the survey, share the link. then at least once follow up all hands, and then copy-paste the reminder and send to everyone, and mention in that reminder that I don't know if you have filled or not, but it's very important, and why is it important? So if you have time, I will be happy if you fill this form. Here are the engagement factors. In our survey, we have 36 factors. They are divided into 8 groups. Like employer brand, result, communication, financial motivation, non-financial motivation, perspectives, processes, and management. So let's define what kind of factors we have in each group. When we are talking about employer brand, we talk about aligned promises and real work. So how people are evaluating what they got. So is that aligned with what you promised during the interview process? The second is company reputation. So how your staff feel about what people are talking about your company around. Third, net promoter score. How comfortable are your staff members to refer their friends to join your team? My favorite one, reapplying to the same job. That statement, that question, means that you're asking your teammates if they are feeling comfortable applying to the current role if they were like a year ago, we were accepting the offer. And how would they evaluate culture and cultural alignment? Result. Do they have enough resources to achieve results? Do they feel that everyone is working for the same result? How they evaluate process effectiveness and personal effectiveness? Like you're not only evaluating how your company is doing, you're also asking your teammates how are they doing. So if they are feeling they are not comfortable with their results, they are not engaged. So the result, the level of achieving this result, affecting their personal effectiveness, affecting their engagement, and if their engagement is low, they are performing bad in other things as well. So they are starting communicating bad as well. Next group is communication. Here we have corporate strategy, task complexity, are they complex enough? Team relationship, process transparency, in general transparency. We will discuss some examples in form of statements later. Do they feel recognized? And their relationship with the management. Financial motivation. Do your teammates feel the connection between their results and their compensation? How are they comfortable with the benefit package? How their compensation is competitive? Here we are just asking, are you getting job offers with higher compensation or not? And how their compensation is aligned with the impact they are making to the company. In non-financial motivation, we are checking professional growth, the possibility of self-realization, interesting tasks, and workplace conditions. Regarding perspectives, we are asking about career growth opportunities, rotation possibilities. You might ask, like, why rotation is so important. So people are not engaged if they cannot move, cannot try new things. If they are not aware of even hypothetical rotation possibilities, how they can change their domain, it directly affects their retention and their loyalty. From my experience, I can say that more than the half of the people who left the companies I was working at, they left with changing their professional domain. So they left because they decided to do something else. Not always people are leaving because they are not happy with manager, with people, with culture, or with compensation. Sometimes people leave because they just don't like their job. And they need to have some rotation possibilities, even hypothetical. And leaving company, we are just directly asking, are you going to look for another job opportunities in the nearest year? Processes, deadlines, independence, and work and life balance, and management, I think it's clear result orientation, caring management, feedback, support, and competent management. Some examples of statements, because I was telling about like we are asking questions and so on and so forth, but actually we are not asking. We are sharing statements and ask people to answer, rather they completely agree, or rather agree, rather disagree, or completely disagree. And we are giving points for answers. So completely disagree is 0, 0.25 for rather disagree, 0.75 for rather agree, and completely agree is 1 point. What's the interesting and the most crucial part in this? That we are pushing people to answer. There are no neutral answers. So in any question, you rather agree or rather disagree, even if you are not sure. And these are statements examples. So we had factor mentioned connection between results and compensation. The statement is the following: the results of my work significantly affect my salary. So I completely agree or rather disagree or completely disagree. The competent management, my manager is fully competent for their role. Transparency, the company management regularly and timely inform employees about the changes. And these kind of statements for each of the factor. This is the method of turning answers to the numbers. And that's why I love the process of measuring engagement rate, because it's like a lot of factors in one, and it's a percent. It's like one number. And I forgot to mention that everything is based on the Alan Hewitt methodology. HR people in the audience might know the company, one of the largest HR consulting companies in the world. A little bit modified by our consulting company like 12 years ago, because we were not happy with the specifics of that methodology, and I'm not sure that the Alan Hewitt clear methodology is applicable for example, Russian companies. And we were running these surveys in Russia for companies with more than 5,000 staff. And this is a completely different thing. That's why we just changed a bit and added more result-oriented things. So just to not ignore the factor of result. But anyways, Alan Hewitt benchmark shows that we can call a company a high-performing company if their performance rate is 65% and more. You can just run a survey and calculate your engagement rate and just find out where are you. But in any case, the best competition will be the competition with you previous year. So with your numbers in the previous survey. I decided to share some ACA results when we were running, just to show the amplitude, how it can be changed. And we started these surveys 4 years ago, in 2021, 3 years ago, we had 7, we have 7 surveys. And during each survey, we are trying to find the pain points. And almost always, we know the reasons. So we are trying to identify the pain points or bottlenecks. And after that, we show the results to the team and present action plan. What are we going to change? What is crucial to remember and follow here? we cannot change statements year over the year. So if you develop one time your questionnaire, you need to keep it every year to make it relevant for comparison with future results. You can add some optional blocks to your survey, like you had some interesting stuff or challenging times in your company. You can add some questions to check if people are comfortable or happy now with this context, but it cannot replace questions from your original survey. You need to communicate all the results to the team, and you need to communicate the action plan and the results of the action plan to the team on a regular basis. So if you have all hands meetings, like you had a survey 1 month ago, you had the results, you had the action plan. In 3 months, feel free to share some things you already changed in this regard. And the last funny one, but I am sure you will try to do that. But don't. That's it. Thank you very much. Here is a QR code for the entire meetup. And I will ask you to share your feedback and answer questions. You can do it now. I can go on with blah, blah, blah to give you some time to complete the form. That's not the same way we are doing with engagement surveys. Yeah, sure.
We have time for questions, right?
Of course.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation, and I was waiting till the end to see whether you will talk about action plans, and thanks for mentioning that. From my experience, the biggest struggle with these surveys is the process of action planning, because sometimes as HR people, as managers, we keep sending the surveys to employees, and those, like in my experience too, those fail if you don't come up with like clear action plans to address the feedback that employees give in those surveys. And if you just keep sending the surveys and don't change anything, they will just like ignore the surveys next time. So from your experience, if you are open to share just some examples, how do you treat action planning, and what have you been able to change based on the results of the surveys?
I will try to remember some things based on the factors, but we had some bottlenecks. In some cases, we just say to the team that accept it. We know that it's our weakness. For example, just let me, like competitive compensation. I know that ACA pays less than tech companies to its staff. And the staff knows that. And they share that. And they clearly communicate that we will make it as high as possible, but we will not be competitive in that case, because we are not a tech company. And we didn't raise money and so on and so forth. In some cases, we are asking people why, for example, benefit package is not suitable for you, and make it a flexible benefit. We started our insurance and sports packages after the survey. For me personally, it was never the case of important stuff. I never used an insurance personally. I don't know how. I didn't know how does it work until this year, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, we realized that it's important for the team. Regarding the professional growth, after one of the surveys when we realized rapid decrease of the metrics of professional growth, we even asked, we created an HR role. Mariam Sarabikyan is here, and she was a part of recruitment team at ACA, And we decided that no, we need an HR person. And she rotated to the HR role to complete this part of the shortage we have. And so on and so forth. For example, we had a lot of things that we communicated that we will do because it's very clearly obvious. But in some cases, we didn't know the solution, but we knew about the problem. So we tried to initiate actions in the direction. But the great question. It's really important, yeah.
One question, are you doing exit interviews, and can you share your thoughts regarding to that? And the second one, you told that you are doing experiments. Maybe you can share one.
Yeah, we are doing exit interviews. We are trying to do it after the person left our team. And now, after Mariam moved to the HR role, she is doing all of our exit interviews. Before that, we were trying to choose the person who is fully trusted by the person who is leaving the company, but not the manager. So the only rule we had, the direct manager cannot do the exit interview. Experiments. So, last experiments were regarding the emotional state and trying to change approach on team meetings. I'm not sure, because I don't think it's a good experiment if after the experiment in 2 weeks in your all hands, one of your regular all hands emails, you share with the team that that was an experiment. So if it's a successful experiment, you just keep going that way. In this way, I think it didn't work, last one. But for example, in some cases, I was experimenting with the middle management, with nominating people for the roles they are not ready for, but they are passionate about it. And here we had a lot of successful and a lot of tragic experiments. And that's why I realized the problem of, in general, people management in Armenia, and our Elite Academy started after some bad experiments at ACI, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question about the positive feedback and negative feedback in surveys, because people who want to share negative feedback, they are more active, and if you feel good, you probably skip this survey because you are okay with this. And if the survey is anonymous, the people that want to give negative feedback, they can fill the survey 10 times and more, and the final results will be not as actual. So most of the active people are putting negative results in the survey. So how do you feel about this, and how to make it more close to reality?
I'm fully okay with that until the tendency is changed. I mean, I'm measuring engagement in my company to compare these numbers with numbers 6 months ago. I mean, 6 months ago, the tendency was the same. But the only thing I noticed that I have both negative and positive feedback in our surveys, but negatives are the first one after the announcement. So if you check the results in your spreadsheet or forms, like in a day after the announcement, the results will be very low. Because happy people, yeah, they are not triggered by the opportunity to share it, so they will wait until the deadline. Yeah. Not happy people, they are waiting for the announcement to share their negative thoughts.
Yeah. And do you have any protection from multiple submitting or not? Anonymously collecting emails.
Collecting emails, no, but we failed once. We failed once. Then in our previous company, when we have a person relocated from another country to Yerevan, and the thing was that the service we were using before that was checking the IP. And she had an IP from Beirut. I don't know how, but they fixed that all responses are from Yerevan, one from Beirut. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now we are using Google Forms. Like, I don't think that it's a secure way, but yeah, they can't just submit it twice. Or they can. Technically, I think they can. Yeah, technically they can, because they are not logging in. Oh, yeah, that's a good question to check, yeah.
So one person can make thousands of...
Negative or positive feedbacks? So sounds like elections.
Hello. Thank you, Narek. One question is a little bit related to the previous one. So, is it ever like causing some focus on negativity just after the survey? Because sometimes people just don't think about negative things, even if they are less compared to positive things. But it might like psychologically cause them to think about those things more and like cause some mood shift in company? That's the first question. And the second question, do you share the results of the whole survey with the team and talk about it later? Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I don't think we initiate some kind of activities for changing or affecting the mood both before or after the survey. Because we are trying to be as much transparent as we can. I mean, if everything is bad, we are trying to communicate that everything is bad. And now we know that everything is bad. And we are sharing top factors, just to not overwhelm with 36 different results. We are sharing top 5 factors and bottom 5 factors. And after that, we are sharing top changes, positive changes, in comparison with the previous research, and bottom 5 changes, I mean negative changes. And we even communicate, and we're trying to discuss that. I mean, what do you think, what are the reasons? Why is that? Yeah, thank you. We have questions here.
Hi, I don't know if it's relevant to your organizations, but in our organization we have employees that are like contractors that are with us for a few months. And how do you go about it? Do you send a survey to them? Or if you don't, like how do you explain it? Because it may impact the dynamics, right? If they are temporary.
Great question. And during our last research, we changed that, because the number of contractors was irrelevantly big. I mean, we decided to do 2 surveys, I mean 2 forms, and analyze the form for full-time employees, but take into account, I mean, in the slide when I was showing the results of the engagement rate, part-time employees and contractors are not represented there, because it would be false positive, because contractors are usually not so attached and not so worried about the bad things. So usually they're happy. In our case, particularly. So usually they don't think that some bad things or harm them. So if we calculate together, we have a percentage rate much higher than when we were calculating for full-time employees. So we are asking questions just to analyze, just to keep it in our mind, but we keep it separately.
Yeah, thanks, Narek. Quick one. How to keep this participation rate number high? Because you mentioned that it should not be obligatory, and fill rate, of course, is very important, and we need to have it high. So, for example, in our company, we also have twice per year, around 50 factors, all this stuff. But we are now observing the decreasing participation rate. How to keep it high?
That's a great question, but I think we cannot affect these metrics within one circle of survey. I mean, you just can't have a challenge to reach 90% this year. I mean, in this survey, you should not push people to fill the survey, but if the rate is low, you can try to find out why is it low. Ask people what do they think about the survey in general. Because I can see two major reasons why people avoid filling out this form. First, the major one, they are not seeing the results. I mean, nothing changed. Why should I just answer this question and spend my time if I'm sure that nothing will be changed based on my feedback? And the second one, the UX. The UX is bad. So number of questions is very high, or it's always buggy, and it can drop me on the second page, and I start over and over. So you can try to realize what are the reasons, but after getting low fill rate on the first survey.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Narek-chan. I just remembered one story from university years. I want to share that. So we had surveys in university once the semester, and once we had a lecturer who's everyone were hating him, and we put one basically or zeros. Everyone put zeros, and then the next semester he came and said, "I know you put zeros, but I don't care." And I realized that this system is broken. So. Yeah, and the question is, you have showed the chart, but I wasn't really sure how that works. This 4 colors, yeah, this one. Can you please explain a little bit more? What is it, how to interpret these results with this chart?
Yeah, it's a benchmark, and it's a picture from the Alan Hewitt benchmark. I mean, they are collecting, they are a consulting company. They provide engagement surveys worldwide to different industries, different companies, and they just realized they have 4 different cohorts with specific patterns. So they call high-performing teams companies with 65% and more and higher rates for engagement, and these are companies with relevant, good results in the business metrics as well.
Got it, thanks.
Another great thing I love about the surveys is that the survey has shown that 99% of people like completing surveys. So that's a representation of the importance of the fill rate. So if you have results for the 50% of your team, you cannot just make conclusions.
Thank you, Narek-jan. 2 quick questions. One is that all the statements are formulated so that if you choose the best answer, like the positive answer, the number is like 1. The rate is 1. Like you have 1, 0.75, right?
They're all equal.
So
yeah.
all the good answers are 1
Correct.
value. And the second one is if the team is very small, like you should still do this, or there is some threshold after that you need to do this?
Good question. Thank you. We started when we were like 12. I mean, it is already okay. It is not okay to do that if you have 5 people in the team, because it won't be anonymous anyway. And the second thing, when we were around 50, I suppose, we have a separate question about the department, mega department. We called it mega department. So we realized that if we divide our operations in 3 different categories, like project management, operations, and business development, we will be still safe, we will be still anonymous. And we decided to ask that question just to find some department-wise patterns. In huge companies, of course, questionnaire contains the questions about the department, about, in global companies, I think, about maybe even gender or age or something else.
Thanks.
Hello. Thank you, first of all. This is really very interesting. So I have another issue. On individual level, when we are talking to people, they say that they're not happy with certain things, but when you send out the surveys, the results come differently. So we have this trust issue, and the company is large, actually. So 400 people, you cannot go and individually talk to each and everyone. The only thing that is left is doing the observations that we do. I'm not an HR, by the way, so I still work on a learning development project, but I'm a UX researcher, and I have a team. So I have this issue, and I want to work on changing behavior and maybe raising the trust issue that we have. I don't know if it's a cultural thing, or maybe you can advise what to do.
Yeah, sure. And it's a very important thing that you identified that it's a trust issue, because before doing anything regarding engagement or culture building or anything, I think there are 2 pillars you should make sure they are working. The first one is a trust. The second one is a respect. So if you are sure people respect each other and trust each other, you can start building the culture, value set, or some processes or something else. In your case, that's great. You have identified that it's a trust issue, and you can talk to each other. You as an HR person, I mean, if you were an HR person, you could talk to each other, maybe with some representation. But without talking directly and honestly with people, I don't think you will succeed in finding the core reasons of mistrust. So we had that issue, but not in the engagement survey. We had that issue when we were trying to do 360. I mean, 360 surveys about the teammates, about peers, about managers, about direct reports, and so on. And we have some, and it wasn't anonymous. It was signed. We had issues with relationship with the manager. It's a purely Armenian thing, I think. I mean, I know that manager have not the best performance, but his direct report or her direct report fills the 360 questionnaire perfectly, because so they like each other, they are friends, why should you will fire him or her, or something. It's not the case with engagement survey, I think, because it's anonymous. But if you're trying to do something with a signature, in Armenia, that's a very difficult thing. Not only Armenia, great, yeah.
And how to minimize the risk of the risk that the opinion expressed or answers expressed will be somehow affected by opinions of formal and non-formal leaders, like expressed or in other subcultural discussions.
If they are affected by some opinion leaders in the team, and under that effect, they are not engaged, so they are not engaged. So we should not avoid this kind of disturbances in our survey. We should know that. I mean, if they are affected, they should be affected in our numbers as well. So how to detect are they affected or not? Not by this survey, but it's a good question and it's a very good challenge to resolve. Thank you.
Narek John, my name is Arsen. So thank you very much for the presentation. So I've got two questions. One of them is about when to start this kind of stuff regarding to the number of the company employers. I mean, like 10 people, 20 people, or 100 or more. And the second one, as you know, like in IT companies, like most of the workers are working remotely for other companies outside, and there are lots of like other cultural behavior that you need to take care when you are just like on this stuff. How to act for the HR people when the persons are working remotely for other companies outside, and these surveys can be helpful, of course, but they are not just seeing each other like personally. They are always like working online.
Yeah, that's a good question. Regarding the first question, Narek asked the same question, so I think starting from 10 is okay, but it depends on the on your team. Are they doing the same thing or not? I don't think it's crucial to start in your team of 10, but it's crucial in your 50. So I think starting from 50 is obligatory for the company to have some kind of HR analytics. I'm not sure I have an opinion about the second question. I mean, I don't think that you should treat differently your remote workers, but it should affect your questionnaire. I mean, you should change your questionnaire and add some new factors about the remote work and about the comfort conditions you're providing them. I think that's it. Yeah. Thank you very much. You said you're tired, but I think now you are tired as hell. So we can go to the networking part. Do not forget about the feedback form. And thank you very much for your active participation.